It now gives me pleasure to introduce you to our DVC, Professor Renuka Vithal, who will moderate the panel with Professor Sozinho and Dr. Langa Khumalo. It's going to be quite a compact session. We'll have Professor Vithal introduce the speakers, introduce the theme, and then a brief input of no more than 10 minutes by each speaker. I know that's a tall order. And then we'll have some audience engagement.
Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to this second session, a panel discussion on language and IKS. Each year in the Teaching and Learning Conference, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've retained a thread on issues of language and teaching and learning, and have had various panel discussions on aspects of teaching and learning and issues of language. And in this year's panel, we're making the connection with Indigenous knowledge systems. So I'm very pleased to invite my two panelists onto the stage, Professor Matsinhe and Dr. Kumalo. Would you join me on stage? And while they're making their way, I'll just make a few remarks introducing them. Professor Matsinhe holds a PhD in linguistics and has from the School of Oriental and African Studies from the University of London. His postdoctoral research focused on language planning and language development, language contact and bilingualism in education, and the use of African languages as medium of instruction in formal education, as well as on morphology and syntax of Bantu languages. He has taught in the Department of African Languages at UNISA, and since 2009, he has been the Executive Secretary of the African Academy of Languages, the official language agency of the African Union, whose mandate is to develop African languages and, in collaboration with member states of the African Union, promote the use of African languages in all domains of society in partnerships with the former colonial languages of English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. So I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Matsinhe to this panel. And then we have our very own Dr. Langa Khumalo, who holds a PhD in linguistics from the University of Oslo and an MPhil in linguistics from Cambridge University. He has vast teaching and research experience in the area of corpus, linguistics, and lexicography, having taught at the University of Zimbabwe and served at the same university as a senior research fellow and research leader of the Ndebele lexicography unit at the African Languages Research Institute. He has been a guest researcher at the University of Oslo and a visiting senior Mellon fellow at Rhodes University. He's also currently the director of the University Teaching and Learning, the University Language Planning and Development Office. And we're very pleased that that unit has really now become a lively a unit filled with many young researchers who are researching all areas of language planning and development. In particular, I was commenting yesterday to Dr. Kumalo that perhaps I wasn't the appropriate person to moderate this particular panel, given that my own area is in mathematics education. But I do, as one of my responsibilities as a DVC for Teaching and Learning, chair the University Language Board. And it has been quite an interesting experience to come into the arena of language planning, development, and a range of other issues. And in particular, the University Language Board has the responsibility to implement the university language policy and language plan. And of course, I had a strong experience of that last year when we implemented one aspect of the policy, which is to make it mandatory for all undergraduate students to have at least one module of isiZulu. And it was quite an interesting exercise to take that, to involve the university community in that discussion and to take that forward and have it implemented. Of course, it really elicited a wide reaction, not only within the country, but also outside. And of course, there's been interest in tracking how that is progressing. But we've, maybe that intervention or that policy implementation has overshadowed other initiatives that we are making in the university. And in particular, I should mention the range of terminology development initiatives, a growing number of modules being offered in isiZulu or in a combination of English and isiZulu, as well as making available to students the possibility for them to attend tutorials in which they are free to engage in English and or isiZulu. And of course, there's quite a lot of research happening as we pilot many of these initiatives to see how they work, do they work, if they work, in what respect, does it help student learning or not, etc., etc. And so certainly we can look forward to a range of research and outcomes of this work. In addition, late last year, we also, as a university that is, as it sees as its vision and mission, the promotion of African scholarship, has also approved an African Indigenous Knowledge System policy. So we do now have a university policy on IKS. And we have been very fortunate to have been funded by the DST and the NRF, a Center of Excellence on IKS, headed by Professor Kaya. And that has enabled us to galvanize and bring together a range of research and work happening on IKS. Now, of course, bringing those two aspects together, the idea of promoting, developing Indigenous knowledge system, both as a curriculum activity, as a research activity, and so on. And then the issue of a bilingual English isiZulu policy that the university is also promoting, and the idea that can we really learn Indigenous knowledge not through the medium of the languages in which those knowledges are expressed? It gets raised as an important area. And what does that mean in a world in which the hegemony of English, and certainly in our own institution and in the country where we want to promote Indigenous knowledge, what does that mean for us in terms of research, in terms of students undertaking research and engaging in curricular activity? So with those few introductory remarks, I'm going to request each of our guests, panelists, to present their particular topics for about 10 to 15 minutes. I saw that Dr. Danpath cut the time further. I know it was supposed to be 20 minutes, but in order to have a bit more discussion. So with the permission of my guests, let's make it 10 minutes and maybe a minute or so over. And then we'll open for a few minutes of clarification questions, and then have the second speaker the same, and then open for a bit of a discussion across the two panelists' presentation. Professor Sina?
Well, thank you, Prof, for the kind word. When you go to conferences, they ask you to write about yourself, and you write things, and you think they will keep them to themselves. Then they bring them to the public. And you present your story, then they say, but this one, what is he trying to do? My mother always reminded me not to talk about myself, but she asked me to write. Anyway, I will quickly run through the slides we have here. But I should have said, because we are here to talk to one another, the first thing I should have said is Sanbonani, Ninjani. You see, in Africa, you start by greeting people. Otherwise, they remain strangers and there's no communication with strangers. Now, I want to believe that you have read the abstract I sent to the university, because that will make my task very easy. Now, this is the structure of my presentation. We can quickly read the abstract so that we know what we are talking about here. Quite a bit of exercise, I'm sorry. Now, what's very important here is this. It is very important. I was warned by somebody that I shouldn't use this type of proverbs. But this part of indigenous knowledge systems, without this, we can't talk about indigenous knowledge systems. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired, so my voice is also tired, but I believe you'll understand what I'm trying to say. In the last 50 years, when most African countries got independence, the question was, how are we going to cook our food? The curriculum we're talking about here is part of cooking our food. Now, there are many discussions, answers, suggestions, but in reality, we must admit and take responsibility of the fact that we've been trying to cook our food in borrowed pots. And the moral of the story is food cooked in borrowed pots never kills hunger. Because when we are trying to do whatever it takes with the cooking, the owner of the pot might come and say, please, can I have my pots? I want to go home. Very simple. We discuss about isiZulu, English, and all of that in a very biased manner. But the point is, I'm sorry because English is my fourth language. We can speak as much English as we want. English won't be our pot. We need to cook the food in our own pots. We need partnership between English and something else, isiZulu and something else. isiZulu, Xitsonga, which is my language. This is the starting point for a meaningful discussion. But unfortunately, it's always either or, and we remain with a borrowed pot. Now, it's 10 minutes we have. These are facts of life we tend to ignore. The most important one is this one. Language is not everything in life, but without language, everything else in life is nothing. We need to accept this. As I will try to say later, when we talk about indigenous knowledge systems, when we talk about development, language is absent in that type of discourse. And it becomes a contradiction. How can we try to talk about something whose depository and the vehicle is not there? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and we can have a very productive discussion and progressive minds if we address them properly. Language is not everything in life, but without language, everything else in life is nothing. Sorry, Prof, I was sitting in one place and somebody came to talk at a gathering. He was looking for votes. He said, I'm going to teach mathematics. What we need in Africa is mathematics. Sorry, Prof. I was sitting at one corner, so I was shivering. I said, mathematics in which language? Tell me. And when I asked that question, he said, well, you know, can we talk afterwards? We never spoke about it. So it's very important to take into account these things. This is a definition I took from a Zimbabwean scholar. What is it that we call indigenous knowledge systems? What is it? What type of animal is this? In which forest does it stay? So this is a very, there are many definitions. There's a board of literature on indigenous knowledge system, but I think this one can serve our purpose. What's very important here is that it includes things like culture and language, and that's very important. I remember here in South Africa, there was a huge amount of funds. You can go to the website of the NRF. You will see about indigenous knowledge systems, but language is not there. So I was asking myself, what are we trying to do? I tried to ask them when I was teaching at UNISA, and I won't tell you the answer they gave me. But we missed the point because language is the depository and the vehicle of indigenous knowledge systems. It's part of our culture. Because of diseases and other things, you find an attempt to meaningfully use IKS in pharmacology. There's been a lot of progress there, but because we are trying to find a solution to treat certain diseases, and I remember it was very known in Sangoma in this part of the country, and there was a big debate because one of the things which we didn't predict was that they are going to claim, from medical aids, they say, well, if you say our things are useful, can we? They say, no, that's not what we're talking about. Can we? They said, the two things go together. So there was some kind of attempt to make indigenous knowledge system come into pharmacology with all that it came with, controversy and all that. Now, this is another fact of life we tend to ignore. This is the African linguistic mosaic. We like it or not, this is a fact of life. We can't run away from this. And if we are not short-sighted, we can't afford not to see it. The green area has got the former colonial languages, which are normal spoken in the urban areas. The red one are the languages we cry in, we laugh in, you can say anything you want. But for some very strange reasons, and obvious ones we know, are always on the periphery. I said in one slide that language is power. So if you know English, you know Portuguese, you know French, you know Spanish, you are empowered. So people think these languages will take you somewhere where you've never been before. But the question is, what are you going to do with the majority which is on the periphery? I used to go to a place, I know still 3 minutes. I used to go to a place where there's a nice restaurant, we eat fish. It's made of glass. So you get there with your jacket and park your car, you sit inside, eat, and the kids come and say, oh, can I park your car? I told the owner, those on the periphery, they will come and knock here, so you better put bricks. You remove the glasses. So we can't afford to keep the red area on the periphery. Our comfort zone will be under threat forever. This is the greatest paradox of our times. Remember what I said? Without language, whatever we have in life is nothing. But what we find is this. Language is usually absent in everything we do. Sometimes we believe that we can get, development is about interventions by human beings who talk together to one another to change their lives for the better. And sometimes we believe we can do that in a language people don't speak. That is quite very strange. So this is what I'm trying to say here. I hope you got the point. Now, these are the two questions which have got a lot of bearing on what we are doing here. Is higher education contributing meaningfully towards tapping into the indigenous knowledge systems? This is a question we need to ask ourselves. The second one, you remember the cognitive damage? Are we preparing ourselves to be agents of change in our communities? When I leave the University of KwaZulu-Natal, I go to my community, and I say I'm a doctor, and somebody comes and says, I'm suffering from malaria, can you give me a tablet? So I say, no, I'm not that medical doctor, but I can do something else meaningful. What are we doing here? These are the two questions I would like us to retain in our minds. We need to collaborate with one another. Sometimes we work in silos, indigenous knowledge system, language out, this one out, philosophy out. We need a holistic approach. So I want to get this proverb here. I'm sorry, I was warned, but I think this one is very nice. You like it. Cross the river in a crowd and the crocodile, sorry, I repeat that, there's a mistake there. The crocodile won't eat you. Those who have visited parks where the migration of animals go together, they make noise. None of them is caught by a crocodile. If one dares to go there alone, it will provide a special diet to the crocodile. So this is the conclusion I want us to retain, and I think it makes sense.
We'll take one round of clarification questions, and then I'll hand over to Dr. Kumalo, and then we'll do the same and then open for further discussion. So I think we had some very useful questions that I think we can engage in a discussion. So Dr. Kumalo, may I invite you to do your presentation?
Thank you very much, Professor Vithal. When I was thinking about my presentation this morning, I was very scared, not least because talking about language is a risk business. It's risky because when you're talking about language, you're talking about people themselves. In my language, isiNdebele, when a child begins to put a sentence together, the elders proclaim him or her to be a human being, usengumuntu, because she or he can put the sentence together for the first time. It has become a human being. So when you're talking about language, you're talking about people, and when you're talking about people, there are all sorts of sensibilities that come up. And Professor Matsinhe here has helped my cause because now I don't fear. He has started the round, and I am going to run as quickly as I can. I had prepared a full-fledged presentation, but I think the panel requires that we do a synopsis of the major points that I had put out there. But what I hope to achieve, particularly in the introduction, is to hazard the hegemony that English has globally, and whether that has come about in a natural way, and also try and debate the issue or the argumentation that English is a lingua nullius, i.e. a language that can be sanitized, stripped of its historical baggage, and then be used as a tool to tie together humanity. Whether that is the modus operandi in this global village, or whether we must take caution, because we have had language and humanity are intertwined. So I will speed through that part and try and then see what I can do with the rest of the presentation, and then conclude by demonstrating the advances that UKZN has made with regards to elevation of an indigenous language spoken predominantly in this region, and how the intellectualization process has unfolded. Robert Philipson, who has done a lot of work in trying to understand the English hegemony and how it is spread across the world, takes us back to 1941 in the House of Commons, and has this to say: the British Empire and the United States, who, fortunately for the progress of mankind, happen to speak the same language and very largely think the same thoughts. Food for thought. He puts together that type of thinking with a speech that was delivered by Winston Churchill at a momentous occasion in his life when he received an honorary doctorate at Harvard University in 1943. And Churchill had this to say: "I like to think British and Americans moving about freely over each other's wide estates with hardly a sense of being foreigners to one another. But I do not see why we should not try to spread our common language," and the key word there is spread, "even more widely throughout the globe and without seeking selfish advantage over any, possess ourselves of the invaluable amenity and birthright. Let us go forward, as with other matters and other measures. Such plans offer far better prizes than taking away other people's provinces or lands or grinding them down in exploitation. The empires of the future are the empires of the mind." And in another paper in 1992, Philipson argues, therefore, that effectively what Churchill was doing was to roll out a plan for English as a global linguistic vehicle for governing the world post the Second World War, and creating an empire of the mind that will be governed in English by the English speaking world. So is it an accident that English is a global language? Is it an accident of history? Is it natural that English has become our language? Strip it of its historical baggage. Use it as a tool for communicating for Christ's sake. Otherwise, you don't have a common language that can tie humanity together. That's the critical question. English has been parroted as a basic skill that is essential in the 21st century, and these are the effects of what Churchill advanced in 1943. And Gradle expresses it so perfectly, which all children require if they are to fully participate in the 21st century civil society. It can now be used to communicate to people from almost any country in the world. We are fast moving into a world in which not to have English is to be marginalized and excluded. And there is no evidence to adjust for this statement. 2/3 of the world cannot communicate in English. China, Japan, Korea don't have English as their vehicular language to advance themselves. 2/3 of Africans hardly, you saw the graph that Prof showed us earlier. All African languages are in the periphery. Very few people who have access to English can use it as a structural mobility towards claiming prominence in society. Otherwise, the vast majority of people do not speak English, have no access to English, and therefore remain marginalized. So the hegemony has been advanced now in an argument that sees or seeks to see English as a lingua nullius, a language that belongs to no one, but that serves us all as well. Really? English serves us all equally as well. Okay. Yeah, it boggles the mind the way we're thinking about English nowadays. And for me to stand here and speak so eloquently in English, I think I'd like to think that I'm eloquent, but that can be challenged. And the chief executive, or CEO of the British Council, in his annual report in 2009-10, he had this to say about English next India. From education to economy, from employability to social mobility, the prospects for India and its people will be greatly enhanced by bringing English into every classroom, every office, and every home. And I say this, I'm sorry, but this is an audacious neo-imperial onslaught camouflaged as an argument that English is a language that belongs to all of us, that ties us all together as a global village. But if you are assaulting a people this way by initiating a program that is going to advance a language to the detriment of all other languages that humanity speak. And I want to quickly, because of time, take you to a statement that I made earlier this year. I have had to skip a lot of detail, as you noticed. But I think this sums up the imperative of this discussion and the imperative going forward on the role, status and role of African languages and their contribution to knowledge economy. The African continent is home to over 2,000 languages. However, it is a staggering reality that there seems to be no single indigenous African language that is used as a medium of instruction beyond primary education level in disciplines other than specific language courses. Africa still retains European languages such as English, French, and Portuguese as languages of instruction in education. Thus, Africa is uniquely one of the few continents where her children receive knowledge in foreign tongues. According to numerous scholars, this is the main reason why many children in Africa drop out from school and why there is such a high failure rate of African learners. African scholars such as Alexandra, Neville, Pamboshe, Hugh, K.K. Pra, and others are advocating for the use of African languages as medium of instruction. For African languages to be able to be used successfully as media of instruction, an incredible amount of resolve and commitment is needed for African governments, educationists, social and natural language scientists, together with language experts, to advance and raise the status and role of African languages in the knowledge economy. UKZN is trying to advance that cause, and I'm not going to talk about the UKZN language policy and what it seeks to do, but crucially, what the language policy at UKZN seeks to do is to accentuate the role, the central role of English as a language of scholarship, innovation, and science, but most importantly, to raise the status, role, and function of isiZulu to be at par with English, so that it can be a language of scientific discourse, a language of innovation and change. But we can talk more about that when I talk to the issues of how UKZN has institutionalized that cause and how UKZN has made advances. So quickly, can I conclude by, again, talking about something that I remarked earlier in the year, the outstanding commitment by UKZN not only to teach a compulsory isiZulu module to all undergraduate students beginning January this year, but to also develop isiZulu as a language of innovation, teaching and learning, science and technology for use in higher education is informed by evidence that language plays a critical role in the comprehension of complex concepts. It is an indisputable linguistic fact that a child must have a solid educational foundation in their first language. This makes it easier for them to understand scientific and other complex concepts if they are explicated in their mother tongue. Further, it gives them confidence, self-affirmation, and self-reliance in the production and reproduction of knowledge, and UKZN is thus rising to the linguistic challenge that confronts the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Langa. Let me just similarly open for any clarification questions, at least one or two, to Langa before I open for discussion. Are there any clarification questions? Okay, if not, then let me then open for discussion this issue of the intellectualization of languages, and then to link it with the a whole issue of indigenous knowledge systems. So I think we've had two very interesting, provocative presentations. Let me then open for discussion about this particular aspect. I would like to keep it to the theme. I know language is a very broad area, and there are many different kinds of questions we can ask, but I would like to keep it to this particular theme of developing African languages as intellectual languages and its connection to IKS.
I would like to get some clarifications. Maybe the both of you can join heads together to help me out. There is usually a problem of transliteration in language. Now, you write, as an author, you write in the language you think. And then the language you think is an exposure of your growing up. And most Africans usually emphasize on teaching their children the English language when they're growing up. And so for a child who is exposed to that language and who feels more confident and more learned that he can speak language, because if he can speak English language, because that is what the parents emphasize. If you are fluent in the spoken language, in the spoken language of English, they consider you as being very smart, being very intelligent and all. And then if such a child grows up and then begins to be remodeled that, okay, you have to learn your mother tongue. Already that child has developed a language he or she is thinking in. Now, you want a transition from the thought, from the thinking to the act.
Ngugi wa
Thiong'o used to write in English. And all of a sudden, he decided to write in Kikuyu, the mother tongue. And what the problem that happened was that he was thinking in English and writing in Kikuyu. And then once you begin to think in the language and write in another one, the elements, the thought process is being lost. So how can we solve that problem?
Okay, thank you.
I would like to, if there's a moment, to put to you a case study from Malaysia, because this is exactly a 20-year-old debate they had, and they made Bahasa Malay their national language. And there are critical issues and challenges because of that. And I would like to put that to you so that you either take it and contextualize it or you discard it as you wish. But 20 years later, English is the fourth or fifth language in a country that took that decision because of the whole colonial debate. It was anti-everything else. 20 years later, they have schools that teach Bahasa Malay, various, Mandarin and Chinese, Tamil, whatever. But 20 years later, they have come back to actually sending their children to international schools so that they learn English, or to the only one school in the country, which are mostly the Chinese schools, which have the best English teachers. So I think we need to think very critically about the how we do this, the what we do about it, and rationalize it so that we do not, shoot ourselves in the foot, and that the people matter more than our political ends. I have to say that, with the 20-year-old gap, they have now come to the point where in the last 2 weeks the government has announced that every university student will have to have the highest proficiency in English if they want to graduate. Yet for 20 years, nobody has emphasized English from kindergarten to high school.
Thank you. We have a third question, and then I'll take another round. Let's just take 3 at a time. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I just want to add to what she said, and I asked question in terms of the UKZN language policies in the system now. How is it different from the primary and then the high school system of including indigenous languages in the curriculum?
So just, sorry, before you give it, just expand a bit on your question. What exactly are you asking?
I'm asking, how is it different?
What, the University of KwaZulu-Natal's language policy?
Yes, from the primary and the high schools that have already got those indigenous languages in the curriculum.
Thank you very much for the questions. As I tried to say in my presentation, the trouble is we say either or. That's not the question. We need partnership, each language in each place. I know the experience from Malaysia. I spent a week with the Minister of Education discussing these things. And I said to him, your problem is because you are saying either or, number one. Number two is our concept of knowledge and development and civilization. In my village where I come from, where I was born, there were people who used to walk around with books like this. We all knew they were illiterate. Yes, we all knew they were all illiterate, but they had books like this every day. Why? Because they did think that, you know, if you have a book written in Portuguese or English or whatever, you are educated. Today, we don't know what to do with the Chinese. If you go to China, nobody speaks English. I went there to teach, and I have to walk around with a bundle of cards because I have to show the taxi driver where I wanted to go. Nobody apart from the university. Today, even the most powerful nations in the world don't know what to do with the Chinese. They did it in Chinese. If they want to speak English, they will speak brilliant English. If they want to speak isiZulu, I'm sure the ambassador of China to this country speaks brilliant isiZulu. Our tragedy in Africa is we don't train our teachers properly to teach English. This is one of the things. We don't train our teachers properly to teach English, and we expect them to teach English. Number two, we can't speak our own languages because we don't train the teachers either. So where are we? So the question is not either or. Let's think in terms of partnership. We'll get very far. Here, go outside and check the cars. The Koreans brought Kia, Hyundai, you name it. They don't speak English. We have passions for BMWs in this country and Benz. That was invented in German and sold in any language the Germans wanted. These are facts of life. We need to be frank to ourselves to advance. Food cooked in borrowed pots will never kill hunger.
Thank
so
you,
the
Prof.
question is not either or. We need partnership. I'm pleased with the language policy here. You see, we are not playing, sorry, Prof, we are not playing soccer here. If you are offside, they blow the whistle and wait for the others. Development is something else. There's no way I can go to my village and say, well, I will stop speaking Portuguese or English so that the others will catch up. It won't happen. But if I say, let's have fair policies which advocate partnership, equity, linguistic equity, in the same way we need gender equity, maybe we'll get somewhere else where we've never been before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much once again for the questions. I think Professor Matsinhe has covered most of the aspects of the questions that had been raised, but I want to say this. Intellectualization has been challenged, and it was challenged most famously by Schiffman in 1992, who argued that the attempt to replace English with Indian languages in India failed monumentally, and therefore that mistake must not be repeated again, because English has gained enough sufficient traction and it must be used as a language, as a global language, a language of science. But here in South Africa, there's a counter example. Right here, closer home, Afrikaans did, I had a perfect quotation actually, because I don't think I'm eloquent enough to put it as much better. Afrikaans developed from what we can call a kitchen language to a language of science and technology and high sophistication. So if Afrikaans can do it, why not any other language? Because every language is inherently as complex as the next one. Okay. So what Professor Matsinhe has said, which is what exactly UKZN has done, is not to try and diminish the role of English as a natural choice in science and technology, but to say, wait a minute, there is 81% of mother tongue speakers of isiZulu in this region, where UKZN is seeking to be a center of excellence and a leading institution in African scholarship. It makes sense then to intellectualize isiZulu so that it becomes a language of innovation and profit the 81% of the people who live and speak this language in this region. So I don't think there's a problem or inconsistency there. And I agree with you perfectly. It is a careful process to carefully plan these things, because language, as I said in the beginning, is a very sensitive issue. You need to carefully plan so that we can roll out a perfect scientific process that can profit the people. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take another round of questions. So raise your hand so I can see you. I see 1, 2, I thought, and 3 at the back there. So let's have Professor Tefere.
Thank you, both presenters. I appreciate that. The language conversation is a very tricky one. I agree with you that it's not an either-or thing. But also, I in fact appreciate the fact that you said that. Everywhere this is an issue. Even with this either-or thing, in some countries like Nigeria, I hope some Nigerians would correct me with my numbers, there are 350 languages. In Tanzania, 120. Ethiopia, 100. I think even if you wanted to develop these languages, it is a monumental task to actually have that kind of possibilities. So we can reject, in fact, it becomes even political to actually elevate one particular language vis-a-vis another one. So English/French or whatever actually plays a very important role of addressing that internal dynamics. So I think as we are even considering that either-or thing, it's not even easy to articulate that either-or, especially in these countries where you actually speak more than, I don't know how many. In this country, I don't know how many languages you have, 20? At least 9 of them are recognized. But in other places, you don't have that kind of luxury of numbers. You have massive numbers. So I think we need to consider those issues.
Let's take the question there.
Thank you. The one is a question, and the one is just wondering what your responses would be. I was just thinking on the issue of making indigenous languages more the use of them more widespread in institutions, whether you would agree that this might help students who speak those languages as a first language to some extent, but perhaps not as much as we would like, because learning isn't just about which language we speak, but which code or which discourse of that language we speak. And the second is more of a political question or issue, and that is around the countries. I'm not talking about institutions now. Countries which have made languages official and intellectualized them. And the two that come to mind most strongly to me are Israel and South Africa, Afrikaans, where I would argue that the institutionalization of Afrikaans and Hebrew are essentially nationalistic projects, which in the long run, I wonder whether they have been in the pursuit of peace and equity at all. So those are my 2 questions.
Okay, and then we've got a third question at the back there.
To the profs, congratulations for having taken this step, to promote the indigenous languages of the country, and also having listened to various speakers with regards to the other languages that are in the country. We've got actually 11 official languages in the country, including Afrikaans and English. But then indeed, those languages, if you look at the provinces that we have, the demographic provinces that we have in the country, isiZulu, is properly positioned in an area where it is easy to be developed, definitely, to become a language of choice. Probably, I'm from Gauteng, and I speak 11 languages, let's say 10 at least of this country. And that to me, it's knowledge. It makes me to be very comfortable wherever I go to, because I don't have to try and let people talk to me in their, try and let people talk to me in my own language, but I speak their languages. So I'm saying the challenge would be, what would be the long-term objective of looking at it at isiZulu to transgress throughout the country, or probably the continent, probably the southern part of Africa, like Ushaga Zulu probably wanted to do during his lifetime. If we look back, how isiZulu emanated and tried to move from Natal into other regions of the country. So I know politically you would say that we do have definitely a president who is isiZulu speaking, but however, the passion comes from an article that I've read at one stage, whereby I think it's a former student of this institution who actually came about with more than 400 words of science, engineering, and technology, that are isiZulu related, and that to me, it's magnificent. We see the challenges that we are encountering as a country, that indeed it is true, it's a reality, that a lot of our people cannot really get better educated than the ones who have got the opportunity to learn English. So I believe language is power. Language is strength. From knowing your own language, you can actually get educated, indeed.
You.
So it needs to be promoted as
Thank
much
you.
as possible. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask the speakers to maybe respond to the questions and then make a concluding remark.
Thank you very much for the three questions. Taking them all together, I think, and I have alluded to the fact that embarking on language raising, which is what Norwegians did a long time ago through Eva Eisen, is an audacious, long, arduous process that cannot be achieved overnight. And yes, you have to make choices. And yes, you have to have national government constituting it so that it becomes a government imperative too. And I was going to show in my presentation that this exercise to raise the parity of esteem of all official languages in this country is protected by the Constitution. So yes, we have a benchmark in this country that these languages must be developed, and government has constituted that. So it's a legal requirement that we should, in fact, promote African languages to achieve this parity of esteem. And this emanates from the history of this country. But, like I said, you have to have a plan. And we were going to show you how UKZN has taken this, has instituted these careful processes of terminology harvesting, terminology consultation, terminology verification, standardization and authentication, before you even take these terms to the classroom for teaching and learning. And yes, there is evidence that cognitively, students who are taught, or there is bilingual exercise in the classroom, begin to learn concepts and understand them better than when it's a monolingual English class. So yes, there is evidence. And we always mourn about lack of evidence and therefore not doing something. But we never want to do research and then come up with a scientific argument that disproves otherwise. So I think there is early indication that cognitively, yes, students do understand better when in a bilingual class than when in a monolingual class. And as we increase the development of terminology so that all these disciplinary terminology are there, because another argument is, no, you can't teach in African languages because there is no technical terminology. UKZN is saying we will start with development of technical terminology so that we equip teachers to have these technical terms to teach and learn. So it's a careful process, a process that cannot be done overnight. It will be, I don't know, it's a vision for Professor Vithal, who chairs ULB, and I think it's something that will take a man's life. But Africans achieved that in less than 50 years. Thank you.
Professor?
Well, I'm much more interested in one question which came from this side. You see, what the university is doing here is to clean the house properly so that they can put the pieces of furniture, each one in its place. When we talk about language in Africa, we need to do a similar exercise. But before I say what I want to say, I want to say something a bit academic and rhetorical. Is multilingualism a liability or an asset? This is the question we need to ask. There's somebody who says he's a free man because he speaks 10 languages. South Africa is unique in the world in the sense that you walk into a shop, you speak any of the official languages, there's somebody who knows it there. I have done that myself when I was living in Pretoria. And I tried here in KwaZulu-Natal, it worked. So multilingualism, to begin with, is not a liability, but an asset. I said to the director of the British Council at a conference in Cape Town last year, if you have one garden with one flower and another with many flowers, which one will you go for? What makes us beautiful here is because each one of us has got its own color in its shirt. This is one thing we have to take into account. We need to have a positive mind when we discuss these things. Mostly, it's not the Africans who say certain things. Some people who don't even know about our reality. One thing we don't say, for example, about multilingualism is that in most African countries, all the languages spoken are related. So if you know one, you can easily learn the next. Dr. Langa Khumalo speaks Isindebele. I heard him having a fluid conversation with the isiZulu speaker. There are no interpreters. Yet, when we count the language, which is, I'm comfortable with that. One is isiZulu, another one is Isindebele. But when it comes to communication, which is all what language is all about, we do it. I put people in a room from Rwanda and Burundi, and jokingly I said, do you want me to find an interpreter? We are all laughing. You know why? Because Kirundi and Kinyarwanda is the same language. So this idea that we have too many languages, yes, but from the linguistic point of view, most African countries, they have languages which belong to the same family. In South Africa, we find people speaking 5 languages. It's not because they are clever than anybody else. It's because these languages are related. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I'm a stronger speaker. Yes. I'm a stronger speaker. When I was learning isiZulu and Isipedi in Pretoria, more than 90% of the words, they were somehow, I can't tell what, yes, that's a fact of life. There was somebody from Ethiopia who told me, no. What the language they speak there? Amharic. That's why I'm telling you that. It's not spoken anywhere else. It's the only language we have. I said, fair enough, but take Oromo, take something else. The colonial borders we have don't correspond to linguistic borders. This is an asset we need to capitalize on. But the point here is, our minds, you know, the quote Dr. Langa gave, you know, we have to tamper with the mind of the colonized. Once you conquer his mind, the rest will follow. As a child, I used to laugh. People who went to town to spend 1 week, when they came back to the village, they said they've forgotten their language. So they speak and mix it together.
Professor, I'm going to ask you to make the concluding remark if you'd like to.
My concluding remarks is, we need to start this debate with an open mind. We don't have to see elephants where they're just ants playing around. That will help us a lot. Yes, let's be realistic. There are problems. We need to plan. We need to do it carefully. Because as I said here, language is a cross-cutting issue. When you discuss issue pertaining to language, even people who know nothing, they will come to rock the boat. And you miss the main point. So I think this is very important. We need to plan. What UKZN is doing is really wonderful. You need to create terminology. You need to check it. We need to verify. That was done in other languages. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope my story makes sense. Thank you.
So with that, I really thank the two speakers for presenting us with a lot of food for thought. And of course, I think the most important point to make is that it's really important that we continue to research and develop African languages alongside other languages, so that we continue to intervene and develop initiatives based on evidence and information and understanding. With that, if you'll join me one more time to thank our panelists and to tea.